This story takes place over Thanksgiving weekend in 1977. Kenny and I and our families had decided to spend the weekend in Smithwick with our mother and dad. So he and I got up on that Friday morning and headed out up to Cross Plains, Texas, where there was a used truck dealer showed to have just about anything that a person might need in the way of a truck, and we were looking for a new haul truck. We had work going on kind of around the state, and we needed something to get equipment around. Before that day was over, we'd driven halfway across the state of Texas, virtually rebuilt a Jeep Cherokee on the side of the road, ended up towing that Jeep with a rented car that was way too small to be towing anything. Ended up spending the night in Centerville's whorehouse. And we got back home the next day without ever buying a truck. Here's what happened. We left Smithwick about 5:30 that morning, Friday morning, and got up to Cross Plains around 8 o'clock. Didn't find anything that was suitable. So I had a little magazine with me that showed all the used trucks around the state. I think it's called My Little Salesman. And there was a truck over in Lufkin that looked just right. Price was right. It looked like it'd do what we needed. So we tore out for Lufkin. I called over there, make sure they were open, and it being a holiday weekend, they were open that Friday, but they were going to close early around 3 o'clock. So we had to hook them up and go if we were going to make it all the way over there by 3. Well, we got over and decided to stop at a little town of Kennard and fill up with gas and get us a sandwich. And it had been raining on us most of the way over there, but that hadn't stopped us. We were still running about 100 all the way across the way. This would be a good place to talk about that Jeep for just a second. I had bought it a few months before and was doing a job down in Houston, and I would drive back and forth from Austin to Houston every other day. We had a new baby boy in the house, Mike, our second, and I didn't want to go off and leave Madeline and those 2 kids there all week without me coming home. So I would stay at an apartment in Houston one night, and then the next night I would drive back into Austin and spend the night, getting in there usually around 9 o'clock and be back on the road, headed back to Houston by 4 o'clock the next morning. Just those trips back and forth like that, running 90 and 100 all the way from Austin to the little town of Hockley, which is out west of Houston there on 290 where our job was. Pretty well got the good out of that little old Jeep in just a few short months. But anyhow, that's what we were in, and we took out across there, and after driving several hours, we needed to stop and get gas and grab a sandwich. So we got to the little town of Kennard, about an hour from Lufkin. When I turned that switch off, I heard that make a noise that I wasn't sure exactly what had happened, but when we got back in to start it, it wouldn't start. And come to find out, the timing chain had jumped from, just its hard day's travel. That Jeep didn't have the best engine going for it. Jeep had been bought out by American Motors as they were trying to become more competitive in the auto industry and wanting to be the number 4 in the big 4 automakers. So they acquired Jeep, and they didn't really put much engineering into that engine, I don't think. Anyway, that timing chain had jumped, and I thought I knew a little trick. Unbolt the distributor, pick it up and turn it one notch over, and the car would still run. It just didn't run very good. So within a few minutes, we cranked her off and took on off again to make that last hour's drive on over to Lufkin. It was raining down on us that day, and anyway, we got on in there, and sure enough, it was a little bit before 3, and those guys had waited on us. Gave us the keys to that truck and took it for a spin, and guess what? It wasn't much of a truck, so decided to pass on it, and went out and got in that Jeep, and what I hadn't realized, when we turned it off there, it jumped time again. There wasn't any picking that distributor up and moving it over, because that threw it too far out of time, so we knew that was never going to work to try that trick over. So we got one of those salesmen to haul us out to the little old Lufkin airport, and we rented a car, and the only thing they had that day was a little Mercury Zephyr. That's a fairly small automobile. And for whatever reason, we stopped at a U-Haul place and rented a tow bar, and decided that we would just tow that Jeep behind that Mercury Zephyr on back to Austin, and then we could turn that car in and the tow bar over there, and all would be good. Except when we got that all hooked up and we're soaking wet, and we head on out of Lufkin back toward Austin, and that Jeep was literally pushing that little car all over the road. And so we decided that if one of us got in the Jeep and kind of drove it and used it for braking, that we could somehow make it on back, and hopefully the rain would stop, and that would help our situation too. But anyway, we took off, and old Kenny, like he always did, was driving way too fast, and I'm back there in that Jeep with really no control other than a set of brakes. And I mean, he's running probably 60 or 70 miles an hour, and I just couldn't. I kept flashing the lights, and I couldn't get him to stop. So I just bear down on those brakes and brought him to a halt. He got out and he wanted to know what the problem was. And I said, well, the problem was he was driving too fast and about to kill me. So anyway, we talked about it a little while, and I said, how about you just get back here in this Jeep and I'll drive the Zephyr. So we tried that a couple of miles, and then he went to flashing the lights because he didn't like the feel of that at all. So we made the decision to just ease on about 20 miles an hour and get to the next town, which was Centerville. That was over on I-45. Well, we got there and going to get a room and spend the night. Well, every motel in town was filled up. Finally, one little old gal told us, if you'll go out to the edge of town, there's a place, there's a big beer joint, and right next to it's a little tourist court, and they rent rooms out there. So we got out there, went in, this gal there behind the desk wanted to know what we needed, and I told her we needed a room. she wanted to know if we wanted it by the hour or by the day, and I didn't, I said, well, I guess probably just take it for the rest of the night and we'll get up in the morning and leave. And so then she informed us that she didn't take credit cards, just cash. Well, I didn't have any cash. I'd pretty well exhausted that throughout the day before, and I had a paycheck that hadn't been cashed, and that girl said, well, I'll take it next door over to the club and they'll cash it over there. So sure enough, she goes next door and they cash that check, and so I pay her for the night. She gives us a key and we go in this little room, and my God, it was the most awful thing. Wasn't that sanitary looking in any way, but hey, we just did the best we can. We just decided we'd get us a shower, but I couldn't imagine walking across that nasty carpet in there. So we got the luck of it, there was a stack of towels there. So there were enough towels for us to dry off with and have enough to make us a towel pathway from the bed to the bathroom. So we laid those towels down. But anyway, we each got us a shower and got in bed, and we couldn't imagine pulling them nasty sheets up very close to our face. So we made do anyway. Got up the next morning, and it was worse than we thought when we walked outside. All of those tourist courts had been condemned, but just maybe 2 or 3, and the one we were staying in didn't have a red tag on it yet. It wasn't really habitable, so I'm suspecting that they red tagged it soon after we left. We called over to Austin and got one of our trusty employees, Don Hislop, to head down that way and with a trailer, and he could haul that Jeep back, and Kenny and I'd go on in that Zephyr and get it turned in. So that's what we did. We ended up meeting Don over in Bryan, Texas, and we just eased over to Bryan, and anyway, got to load up, came on back, went by the yard and got another vehicle and turned that car in, and we went on to Smithwick without ever buying a truck. Old Paul Quinney was working for us back then, and he ended up tearing into that Jeep and putting a new timing chain on it and got it running, and I eventually let her go. But that's a whole other story, not for today.